for being here. Welcome. Do we have some first-time riders in the room? Wonderful. Thank you for being here. There's a few folks I know are in the room for the first time. I'll do a little bit of introduction as we go through this. Just to give a little bit of background, so Rachel shared a little bit about our organization. We've been operating for about 11 years now, really focused on technology-based economic development, or TBED. And so what is that? That's really about the fact, like it or not, emerging technology drives the global economy. It has, since like stone went to bronze, went to iron, these industrial revolutions that have happened through the years, all these kind of things, to much more modern times, the internet, right? Did the internet not change every single industry, right? And right now, we position right around IoT, Internet of Things, and one of the exciting announcements that I'll make right now is that over the last several months, we've started a new multi-year partnership with the Small Business Administration to run the US, and I would argue global cluster for IoT and what we call the data economy. Support from many corporate sponsors, from many of you members of the audience that have supported us both financially and with your time and your intelligence, your expertise over the years, and now with the SBA to run what's called a regional innovation cluster. So in the US, North Carolina is the recognized center of excellence for IoT and the data economy, and it's because of folks like you. So congratulations. All of the Regents SBA for North Carolina is here with us as well, so thank you for being here.
Happy to be here, thank you.
So again, on this kind of technology theme, where we're at a point in history where everything is becoming more and more about the automation of data. And so briefly what that means, and some of you who've maybe been to these events before have heard me say this before, but the automation of data is all about collecting in real time, with as low latency as possible, data about the world that's around us. Most of that is done through sensors, whether it's a temperature sensor, whether it's a microphone or a camera, or whether it's our fingers as sensors typing into a keyboard or swiping a touch screen, whatever the case might be, collecting this data, quickly aggregating that data, usually to the cloud, and that aggregation almost always is happening over some type of either fiber or wireless network. And then analyzing that data with this little phrase we call AI. Has anybody heard about AI? A few of you, right? We're going to talk about that some tonight. But the whole purpose is as quickly as possible and in real time to say, based on all this data that we've pulled together and put context around it, and we've done analytics, we're going to recommend some response. And that recommendation might come to a human to then take action on, or increasingly, it's kind of machine to machine. And so things are being automated. Whether it's, I have a wearable, I don't have any on now, but I have something monitoring my health that immediately when it detects there might be a problem, right? I might be having a stroke or some acute condition has come up. Let's automate the response of getting first responders or healthcare, whatever it is, to try and address that situation. Whether it's the automation of distributed loads across an energy grid from various renewable and non-renewable power sources, storage devices like the cars that we're increasingly driving that are electric, et cetera, et cetera. Like, how do you take the real-time data to automate things, automate agriculture, education, transportation, on and on and on. That's kind of where the world is going. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit tonight. I'm going to present a bunch of data. No need to take notes. Everything that we talk about today is in a rather large piece that I've written. I've kind of pre-written a transcript that we're going to publish on Monday through WRIoT TechWire. So you can look for that. I read a weekly column on TechWire as well called Datafication Nation, where I share a lot about what's happening in the area. Part of the goal of this event, it started, I think this is our 8th year now, doing this state of the region. It started really, quite honestly, as a little bit of a lampoon of the State of the Union, right? Every year, our political leaders get in front of Congress, in the front of the whole world, right? And they pontificate about how great they are and how bad their predecessor was and this, that, and the other. But we thought, you know, it is an interesting and a useful exercise to think about how do we stand? Like, where is the triangle? Where is North Carolina? Where is the US? How are we competing in this economy that's increasingly driven by advances in technology? Are we enacting the right policies to lead? Are we educating the right workforce to fulfill the opportunities and so on? And so with a little bit of that theme, I'm going to go through a lot of data about North Carolina. And I'm also going to contrast with a bunch of data about Virginia. You may or may not know that over the last 3 years, North Carolina and Virginia have been ranked the #1 and #2 states to do business in the United States. Which is amazing. And we flip-flopped a little bit. Right now, Virginia's #1. Sorry, we're #2. I'm sure we're going to get it back. Although I will admit, we do work for the state of Virginia. They actually hire us to do work there, so we're pretty friendly there as well. I actually think collaboration between the two states is ultimately a better solution than direct head-to-head competition. But I'll share some data on that. And then we're going to talk about technology. I recognize that I tend to ramble a little bit. I'll try not to drive too long. There are plenty of open seats for those of you that are standing. Do not be shy about coming up and saying, sit down if it's getting long. But I also want to take your questions. So as we're going along, you know, as you have some thoughts, you know, I'm going to try and end, you know, early enough that we can take some questions. I want to hear from you. What are you thinking about? What are you excited about? What might you be nervous about? And so on. All right. Any questions before we start? Does that make sense? All right, seeing a lot of head nods and thumbs up, great. So let me start, I'm going to start a little bit with some data on just like economic and job stuff. So let's start the state of the region looking at, let's say, labor and workforce, right? As we look at it, this year, 2025, is projected to be the first year in the history of the United States that enterprises, companies of all sizes across the United States will eclipse $1 trillion in spending on outsourcing. To give a little bit of perspective, just 2022, just a couple of years ago, it was $700 billion. That's a pretty significant increase, and a lot of that is driven by something we're passionate about, which is entrepreneurship. So when you look at outsourcing, there's all kinds of different kinds of outsourcing get lumped into this giant number. It's 1.09 trillion is what is estimated by Fortune, the source of that data. I was interested, as I was doing some research, I was surprised to find, just as one example, 80% of companies in the United States outsource human resources. Right? That's crazy. You know, for a lot of small businesses, that might be like hiring a PEO or something to do your payroll and just, you know, create your employee handbook or whatever. But even for big companies, they realize, hey, we can outsource that. When you look at the labor side of it, there's 73.3 million gig economy workers in the United States. Right? That's more than 1 out of every 3 kind of working age person in the country. In fact, I'm looking at Margaret McNabb, who ran the Freelancers League for a number of years, right? You know, like, folks have decided, for whatever reason, kind of new generations decided, I don't necessarily want a 40-hour-a-week career with a single employer. I'm pretty happy to work a number of jobs and to kind of outsource and freelance my skills and ability. And what's cool is industry has been like, hell yeah, let's do this, right? They're happy to have less full-time employees. It reduces overhead and fringe benefits and other kinds of ancillary costs on the business. And so, you know, the entrepreneurship is like through the roof when you look at it from like a freelance point of view. 90% of employers, Statista had done some polling and research, 90% of employers in the US intend to increase their dependence on freelancers in 2025 compared to 2024. So it's a clear business strategy. Now, there are some things to be aware of. 84% of freelancers live in urban or suburban areas. And it's almost an equal balance between those two. Very little in the rural area. And when you talk to industry about that, there's less demand for it. There's still a little bit of a cultural divide. So companies and small businesses in more rural areas are doing a little bit less of this than others. I don't know exactly what that means, but that's what the data says. When you look at the remote workforce that was really sparked initially by COVID out of necessity, but has persisted. You look at Virginia, 18.2% of workers in Virginia work remotely. And in the real urban areas like Northern Virginia, it's 26%, more than 1 in 4 workers work remotely. We're not quite, we're a little bit behind that trend in North Carolina. 16.2% work remote here in Wake County, which tops it out, it's about 22%, so we're a few percent behind, but similar kind of trend. What's interesting is when you look at the average wage in North Carolina across all industries, all job types, all everything, it was, let's see, make sure I got the number right here. The wage in North Carolina was $32.30 is the average hourly wage for any worker across the state of North Carolina. I wasn't able to find that across all of Virginia, but for freelancers in Virginia, the average wage is $15, actually $15 higher, $47.30. And similar things here. So this freelancing thing seems to be resonating. It seems to be doing well, and it's a trend. And I think folks are interpreting entrepreneurship in a lot of ways. We normally think of entrepreneurship and RIoT's work around like starting new tech scalable businesses, like that kind of entrepreneurship. But just individuals working remotely, that as well as that is really an entrepreneurial mindset. What does that mean in terms of our investment? Corporate vacancies are at 19.8%. Corporate real estate vacancy, 19.8%. New investment in real estate from a corporate point of view is at historic lows. It's 10% below the low of, if you look at kind of like the lowest average years over the last 25 years, it's 10% lower. If you look on the industrial side, 49 out of 50 states are seeing a decline in investment in industrial facilities. It's, physical space is becoming less important in this digital economy. That's a little bit interesting. The question, I think, as we look at AI as the hot topic in the room is, if companies are really, really comfortable saying, I do not need this core competence, I do not need people with this core competence inside my organization, developing out the legacy knowledge, helping us over time to optimize things that might be more difficult to discover from the outside than it is from the inside. We're comfortable with this. We're just saying, let's take the cost savings, let's take the efficiency, let's take the ease with which we can turn the volume knob up and down on outsourced resources. And now AI says, I can do knowledge work. What is that going to mean? There's a lot of nervousness about how is AI potentially going to be the new outsourced resource, because it clearly can be lower cost. Can it be as high quality? I don't know. So CNN has done some polling. 64% of large firms intend in 2025 to invest in the replacement of repetitive tasks with AI. So that's not quite so far as saying we're replacing the human entirely with AI, but at least some aspects of what people do. That's the intention. Fox did similar polling, and 25% of CEOs have said directly, in 2025 we intend to replace humans with AI, to remove workers with AI. And it's across like lots of different functions, right? And it's pretty scary. I really do believe that 2025 is going to be a year of pretty significant experimentation in the business world with this new tool that is reaching some level of kind of mature capability. I think it's going to be messy, and that some experiments aren't going to work out as well as maybe the companies hope that they would, but it's going to happen. So, those are worried, like, I don't want to sugarcoat that it's not going to happen. I think there's going to be that experimentation. Now, I think what's going to happen is that there's going to be a bit of correction. So you go back to the PC. Remember when all of a sudden, like, we could all have a PC at our office? The desktop computer was a big deal. And by the way, you go back to like the old media reports from, say early 90s and so on, it was the same thing. Like these computers are going to replace our jobs. And what ended up happening is computers replaced a lot of tasks. We didn't have stenographers anymore. We suddenly had people doing more processing, doing that kind of thing. Different kinds of jobs came about. Many of them were higher wage. And new technology throughout all of history has always proven like it actually creates more jobs than it destroys. It just changes things. There's going to be some of that with AI. Not 100% sure it's going to be quite the same ratio of new jobs to old like it has been in the past. That remains to be seen. But what happened in that PC era was that, with the benefit of hindsight, we can go back and do measure, and we find that a person augmented by a personal computer became 4 times more productive. And so in those early days, there were people that lost jobs to computers and so on. But over time, business people said, hey, I could remove 1 unit of cost by getting rid of that person. Or I could keep that 1 unit of cost and get 4 units of productivity out of them. I'm not going to fire those people. I'm actually going to hire more, because every time I hire 1 person, I'm kind of getting 4 by giving them a computer. And I think that's a little bit what can happen with AI, is those who become fluent at these tools and get good at these tools, the estimates right now from economists are that AI will make someone who already has a computer now 9 times more productive than they were before. So somebody who didn't even have a computer, I guess that's 36 times more productive than a human with no technology. Right? And eventually companies are just going to say, well, rather than removing that 1 unit of human, let's make them into 9 units of productivity. And so there's going to be some of that correction. It's going to take time, because I don't think that there are enough of us yet really fluent at the tools. And I think the tools themselves are, they're still developing. And I'll talk about that here a little bit in a moment. But that's kind of where I think there's a lot of innovation that's happening. There's a lot of experimentation that's happening. There are, in North Carolina, so I just said, some big numbers as far as CEOs wanting to move forward. So North Carolina right now, it is estimated that 5.1% of companies in North Carolina are using AI in their workflows today. Right, so that's still pretty small. Now within the next 6 months, by July, it's supposed to go up to 6.6%. The national average is about 6%. So we're a little bit behind the national average in bringing AI into our workflows. So still a little bit early days, but this is the inflection point where things are going to really move forward. Will the recent announcement from DeepSeek, greatly accelerate the pace of adoption? Maybe. Anything that can be done at lower cost. Certainly, low cost tends to be a catalyst towards more usage. But honestly, most of the tools that are out there are being offered at dramatic discount compared to the cost anyway, because these companies are trying to capture market share. What's happening in this AI space is pretty interesting. I wrote a couple weeks ago about when you look at like the hotness right now has all been around what are called general purpose transformers. These are the GPTs, right? ChatGPT. This is Claude. This is the other tools that Anthropic and Meta and Google and just a very small number of really, really big companies are driving forward. Very, very quickly, much more quickly than just about any other technology you can think of, these general purpose transformers are becoming a commodity. So there's a land grab right now to get as many users using your tool as possible, because the fact is the tools are not really that much better or worse than each other, nor will they be. When you look at training data, in 2025, it is expected across the entire world that the planet will create 175 zettabytes of data. A zettabyte is a trillion gigabytes, right? So that's a lot of data. Now, 90% of that data is going to be duplicate. But the total that's getting created, all of you taking like the same pictures of me to post on Instagram, that's like largely duplicate data, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, it's still a lot of data. You go back only 10 years to 2015, the planet created 8 zettabytes of data. Right, so in 10 years we went from 8 to 175. The two big reasons for that, one is cameras. There's far more cameras connected to digital repositories, to the cloud and so on. And IoT, Internet of Things, sensors everywhere that you can possibly imagine. And the rate of new data creation is just going to keep going up and up and up. Let's go get back just 10 more years, 2005. In 2005, the planet created 0.05 zettabytes of data. The large language models, these general purpose transformers, are already reaching an asymptotic point of existing data to train on. And once all these tools are basically all trained on the same digital data, it's really, really hard to train them on data, on things that aren't digital. Like, if you go back earlier than 2005, we just didn't digitize much, It's hard to put the phone book into GPT. So it's really becoming very, very quickly a commodity resource. And when you hear wild assertions like we just heard from DeepSeek out of China, that, hey, that thing that took a US company $1 billion to do, we did it for $6 million. One, it is not in any way an apples to apples comparison. A lot of that technology was built upon prior work that had already been done and invested from other tools. I heard a hilarious interview on NPR the other day. They had, I didn't catch his name, I was driving, but they had a member, OpenAI, had a member of their government relations and PR team was on the radio, right, and said, hey, DeepSeek stole our data to train their models, and that's what made it so easy. And I was so proud of the NPR interviewer who quickly then said, yeah, but didn't you steal other people's IP to create your models? There's a huge just race to get users, right? And so, hey, we're going to tell you we can do it for $6 million, whether we could or not, just because it's such a shocking thing. A lot of you are going to go out and try it, right? And these companies are trying to just capture market share. Where the real value is going to be created in this whole AI space, I believe, over the next several years, is going to be like niche use case applications. So how do you not worry about the generalized thing, but I'm going to take a really, really specific data set that no one else has for a specific use case. I'm going to build a great company around that. We had a company come through our accelerator program just about a year ago or so out of Richmond called Answer This. That said, we're just going to look at the really niche data set, still large data set, but niche data set of academic research papers. All the stuff that gets published in IEEE and goes, these academic conferences, and they developed a tool to help researchers to automate the creation of their literature review for new research, with the theory that researchers, they go out, they try and find all the prior art and prior work that's been done in their area of research so that they're not repeating things that have already been done, but it's impossible to really do that with the scale of how much stuff has happened around the world. So what a great application for an AI tool to really figure out what has happened and what hasn't, so that researcher can work on something that's new and bring technologies to market much, much more quickly. This company is killing it in this really, really niche area, right? Those are the kind of places that I think the value will be created. Long term, I think that really where the value will be created and why we're excited to lead this Internet of Things consortium is that the data that will be the most valuable is the data that just happened, right? If you have an autonomous vehicle, it's useful for it to know the historical map information of where the road goes, but it's much more important to know, did a child just jump off the sidewalk in front of me, right? Immediate information, and information is really just data with context, right? So as soon as you can capture a piece of information and automate and do something with it, that is really the value of the future. The general purpose transformers are the baseline of okay, here's what we always used to know, but the application, we're living our lives in real time. We don't necessarily want to live our lives 20 years ago, right? We want to do whatever's happening right now. And so that's ultimately where things are going to go. And to achieve that is going to be this convergence of the data collection through sensors and IoT devices, the aggregation through high-speed networks, the analytics, increasingly through edge compute, and then and then the responses. So as you look at from a business point of view, those are the places that I think are important to focus. The challenge I think that we have right now is that 2025 is likely to be a year that has perhaps the highest levels of uncertainty that we've ever seen. Maybe not that we've ever seen, but that we've seen in a long time, right? We have all of this technological uncertainty of what's happening primarily because of AI. We're not quite to a level where we'll have uncertainty from quantum. That will come at some point, particularly when a quantum computer is almost certainly going to be the thing that breaks down cryptography. And suddenly it's like, oh, somebody has a technology now that gets past all the passwords. And we'll get to that. That's a couple years down the road still. But we're going to have a lot of uncertainty right now around technology. And obviously the big elephant in the room is what's happening up in DC. There's a tremendous amount of technology and what's happening in policy. I'm going to try not to be too political, but you'll probably ascertain a little bit of my political leanings as I talk here, but I think this is important, so I'm trying to not do a political talk, but more, just a reality talk here. We have an administration right now that is as fast as it possibly can deleting data. That's not good. The more we know, the more we can make intelligent and guided decisions. So, repressing data is not a good thing. This is going to be probably an administration with the highest levels of censorship that we've ever seen, at least out of a federal office. We also have a tremendous amount of uncertainty around funding. So government at all levels, if you look, federal, state, local, government services, government expenditures of all kinds are 36% of the GDP. Maybe the Republicans have a good argument to say the government's too big. I don't know. It's a big industry. It's the largest employer across the United States. And, it drives our society. I tend to believe that actually it's a good thing. I like having safe communities and navigable roads and et cetera, right? But I'm not going to go down that path. But there's been, just in the last couple of days, a whole bunch of, hey, we're going to shut down all the grants. Oh, well, maybe we're not, maybe we are. That's not all of this 36% of GDP, but just grants and things. And this is trillions of dollars. We are fortunate to have really good partners in NCID, and I see Tom and Barry and a few other folks here in the room that helped us to get a survey out across North Carolina to ask folks like, hey, if just this one slice of government spending really was shut down, even just for a short period, what would it mean? And so we got responses back, I think, from 26 entrepreneurial support organizations across the state, east, west, central, kind of all over. And we found of those, 39% have at least some percentage of their budget is federal grant money. So not necessarily grants, contracts and things. Some of them have those also, but they have grants. And it varies. 8% of entrepreneurial support organizations in North Carolina, 75% or more of their budget is federal funding. Others, about half of them take any federal funds at all. Of those, if their funding from a cash flow point of view were cut off just for a month, we would find, make sure I have this right, a 1 month pause, 61% of those organizations would have to make a reduction in the programs that they offer. At a 3 month pause, 46% will begin laying off staff. Right? These are the organizations that are really fueling the growth of our entrepreneurial economy and our startups and our new businesses. Still, the vast majority of businesses in the United States are small businesses. The vast majority of jobs, the vast majority of the economy are all small businesses. We hear about the few big tech conglomerates and the few, consumer product good conglomerates. There's giant companies. Those giant companies are the wealth of the Wall Street, but they're not really the job creators or the economic engines. It's small business that is. And so to put a dent in the organizations that are supporting small businesses, it is massive. Even at just a 3-month pause, 8% of ESOs state they would probably go out of business, right? When I've thought about this, I've talked to others, we don't do this often, but let's think about the government from the point of view, from like a corporate lens. What if the government was actually a for-profit company, right? I've spent most of my career in big multinational companies. And then I spent some time in the university system. I've been running RIoT for a number of years, we're 501c3. Every kind of organization, I don't care what your legal structure is, your revenue has to exceed your costs, or you go out of business, right? Business 101. From a government point of view, we're entering an era of intense focus on the bottom line, the cost side of the balance sheet. When I've been in industry, as soon as a company starts focusing predominantly on cost, they are in a slow death. Why is that? If your focus is, we are going to win the market by out-costing everyone else. If you have really, really deep pockets and cash reserves or investors to bail you out later, to bail you out from your kind of self-imposed bankruptcy, maybe you can use that to drive everybody out of business. And then you're the only one left. But that really happens extremely rarely. Really what happens is if you're just focused on reducing costs, by nature you're now reducing margin. And your competitors to compete also reduce costs. So the whole market starts to become a race to the bottom. When you don't have good margin, you can't invest in your future, right? It is, successful companies focus almost not at all at the bottom line. They focus on the top line. How do we drive revenue? Because when we have healthy margins, we can invest in our future. And when we invest in our future, we become stable and we become sustainable and we can grow and we can be successful. So, when we run our accelerator programs, we really impart on companies, your number one job is driving revenue and driving that top line. Don't be irresponsible on cost, but if you're just focusing on cost, you're in trouble. And unfortunately, over the last several decades, primarily through defederalization, our nation has been focusing more and more on the cost side. About 30 states now have Republican supermajorities, almost all of which, or perhaps all of which, I don't know because I haven't been able to research every single state, but are really focused on revenue reduction and cost reduction that have smaller government. Maybe the private sector will pick that up. We'll see. But we do rely on society. And so I would argue, from that point of view, reducing revenue, taxes, creates a situation where it's hard to invest in our future. And we've seen it in rural economies. As populations decline, tax base declines, revenues go down. How many rural communities and cities and towns have we gone to where everything is like sparkling and brand new, right? It's hard to do that kind of investment. If this federal administration really cuts off the spending, if the DOGE stuff happens, we need to be prepared to say, okay, our local governments now have to really fund themselves. In the state level in North Carolina, we've taken away corporate income taxes. We're looking to further reduce our private income taxes. We're reducing our revenue. If that investment comes from somewhere else, okay, we don't see corporations increasing their spend to make up for it. And so it's going to be interesting to see if now in our suburban and urban areas we see the same kind of challenges that we've seen over decades in rural communities where we just don't have the revenue to invest in ourselves and to invest in our future. So that's something that, again, I'm trying not to be too political, it's just, this is the basic math of how business operates and where we are. We have a number of municipal clients that hire us to do work. And several of them, very successful communities, I'm not going to call them out a name here, but that they're deferring maintenance on infrastructure. They are on hiring freezes. Some of them are on travel freezes. Like, these are small parts of a budget, right? Those are like the kind of corporate behaviors that I saw in industries I worked in. That, you know, at one time I was part of a Sony Ericsson facility. We had 1,600 people here, and then we started to go into cost mode, and there's 0 people left in RTP at that facility, right? So anyway, that's something that we should think about as we look at, like, how do we compete with other places like Virginia and others. Virginia recognizes that uncertainty is not good for business. This uncertainty about, like, what's going to happen in the political landscape, what's going to happen in technology and AI, it's scary. Well, Virginia, they haven't changed their corporate tax. Their corporate tax is 6%. They haven't changed it since 1972. It survived blue administrations, red administrations. They said stability is good for business. They have gotten some of the biggest infrastructure projects of any state in the entire country. In fact, they have the biggest. I think they have 2 of the 3 biggest in the history of the United States are in Virginia. And you know, one is private. It's Amazon's $34 billion data center project that they're working on in Virginia. So that kind of stability is important. There's also investment. So at a state level, Virginia invests in startups. They have a program called the Virginia Innovation Partnership Corporation. It was a nonprofit the state set up. They get $42 million annually from the state to invest in, you know, equity investments in startups, grant investments in startups, and financial support to entrepreneurial support organizations. South Carolina does it through the SCRA. Tennessee, $70 million per year to do it through what they call Launch Tennessee, or Invest Tennessee is the equity piece of it. Michigan, January 1st, just announced a new program, $60 million per year, very similar to the Virginia program. Like, states are investing in the next generation of technology. In North Carolina, we don't do that. I don't believe it's even a conversation that we're having. There are some things that we're doing that are good. We, for years, have had a grant matching fund for companies that get what are called SBIRs and STTRs, grants to advance research, and we have a matching fund of that run by Department of Commerce. This is good. You've probably heard of NC Innovation. This is a new organization that was set up. In the state, I think it was really, really smart as a model maybe we can replicate in other areas, where they parked $500 million in a bucket, right? And that money itself can't be spent down, but that generates annually, it generates returns, right? And so the returns are going to be used to help financially support the commercialization of kind of early stage technologies in a number of our research universities across the university system. They're not the Dukes and the NC States of the world, right? Some of the smaller schools. And it's, you know, it's financial support to help get that stuff out of labs and into the commercial space. That's a great first step, but the interest off that program still pales in comparison to what other states are doing, and it's still not really equity investing. What these other states are doing is they're saying, we're taking taxpayer money, we're going to put it into companies in our state, and then when those companies have an exit, that money is going to come back, make that fund evergreen, and we'll continue to reinvest in our future. The state of Virginia did something really, really clever. They developed a matching program for venture capital firms to come in and say, hey, we're going to give you some state money to manage for your investing the funds from your limited partners, and those LPs are getting additional investment on, sidecar on what's done. But it has to be just Virginia-based companies, right? And then what did they do? Well, they approached North Carolina VCs for these partnerships. So they're drawing money from our state up to their state because they're matching it, right? It's pretty smart move. Because good investors will invest whatever the geography. I actually kind of like this if it can become the kind of thing where like North Carolina and Virginia are actually working together versus competing. But right now, if only one side is doing this kind of thing, it is kind of competition. Let's see, what else do we want to talk about here? I do want to kind of move towards the Q&A. So let me just give a little bit more data on kind of the startup and investing space. We're doing pretty well on private industry investment. As a state, we invest 2.7% of our North Carolina GDP into R&D, which is better than, well above national averages. Virginia, 2.1%. So we're investing in R&D better. Now, Virginia is a much closer balance of government, state spending and private spending. In North Carolina, 75% of the R&D investment is private industry investment, not that much from the state. I think it's an opportunity as a state for us to grow. If you look at like overall state revenues, we draw, as a state, we draw about $30 billion in tax revenues on an annual basis. Virginia, about $25 billion. But on a per capita basis, when you look at the size of the states and so on, we're actually very, very, very close. The ratio from North Carolina to Virginia is 2.93 to 2.86, like almost 1-to-1 on a per capita basis. So we're driving kind of the same amount of revenues. How do you deploy it? So they're deploying a little bit more towards startups and support and R&D and technology than we are. As two states, we're not anywhere in the realm of what the top three, California, Massachusetts, Washington, New York, actually as well. They're all between 5.5 and 6.6% of GDP into R&D. And as a reminder, we're at 2.7, right? From a venture point of view, I don't think I had last year's number, I think it's the year before was the last I could get fully aggregated, but $1.7 trillion in VC in the state. Virginia, 1.4 trillion. So we're ahead there. I remember a decade ago, I think Raleigh founded this about a dozen years ago, this scene was starting to build up, and one of the biggest complaints you heard all the time was, well, there's just not enough capital. How do I raise money? We are in a really good position in that regard. We have got venture funds. I talked last year about how many of our venture funds are on to Fund 3, Fund 4. Every fund adds 3x the amount of capital. So we've got some of the later round funding here locally. We still don't have the mega, the $1 billion funds and so on like you have in California. But we've got healthy, high-end money. I think far more important is we have not lost sight of the earliest stage investments. NCID, I mentioned earlier, they just hit a milestone this year, $10 million deployed, their private foundation. They're deploying, by the way, at $10,000 and $50,000 at a time. Very, very early revenue into small businesses. That is critical. Right next door to RIoT upstairs, we've got the Triangle Tweener team, Scott Wingo's latest venture. The Tweener Fund invests primarily in companies that are either at roughly $1 million annual recurring revenue or below, what they call pre-tweeners. They manage what's called a tweener list, which looks at companies that are at least either 10 employees or $1 million in revenue annual. And there's over 300 technology companies in the triangle just on that list, right? That's really, really healthy for our economy. They're now investing. They are, without any question, the most active early stage investor in the Southeast. And depending on what month you look at the data, they're the most active investor in the nation, right here. And then we've got the things that Primordial and Jurassic Capital are doing, or Return. There's lots of early stage stuff that's really important. We should never lose sight of the earliest stage money. That is the most important money in the history of the company. Eventually companies, if there's any startup companies out there, you gotta start making revenue. You can't just raise money forever. But having that early boost is really important. So I think that we're doing well there. When I look at what are the things that we need to do better, and what are the things that we can do now in this period of really, really high uncertainty, I think there's a few things that are important. First, now is not the time. Now is the absolute worst time to kind of pull back from the community. We are primarily a sponsor-driven organization, and I've had some challenging conversations with a number of folks. There's some companies that we work with, some are here in the room, who are unable to sponsor at this time. A lot of companies are saying hey, the water is choppy, we're gonna sit back and wait to see if the storm calms down a little bit before we spend on things like an event like tonight, right? This is a small sponsorship spend, but companies are kind of pulling back and saying, hey, we're gonna wait and see. It's a self-serving message because we're funded this way, but it's the wrong thing to do. Right now, the most important thing that any of us can do in times of uncertainty is be out in our community. What are you hearing? What are you learning? What have I experienced? What is your lived experience? For those of us, we just heard it, right? 16% of people are working remotely in Wake County. 22% of you are working from home. You're working from home and not getting out in the community. You do not know really what's going on. If you're just relying on what you're hearing on Fox News or on X or on wherever you get your information, you're only getting a tiny, tiny fraction of what's really happening on the ground. Get out in the community. If you're a corporate leader, like, demonstrate that you want to be a part of what's going on and what's happening. The technology's changing really, really fast. Do you keep track of that yourself? No. You try and experiment on some things. Someone else tries some experiments. Share your experiences. Share what's going on. You're going to learn together. You're going to advance better together. So, number one, that call to action is, like, get out. You're excited. You're here tonight. Like, you're doing the right thing. Tell your friends. Go to all kinds of events. There's a few opportunities I'm going to point out. So, we have great friends in an organization called All Things Open. In March, they are running, I think it's the 17th and 18th, they're running an open source and AI conference in Durham, I think, at the Carolina Theater. It's an amazing facility. We've got, you want to just briefly announce the workshop that you're going to be running, Marcia?
Yeah, on the 17th, there are classes for training, and they range all the way from what you would call basic, to get trained in super user kind of things, through development. And I have community partnerships, and those are two areas where there are opportunities. And I'm going around engaging in the partner side. We also have another day where there are speakers. You really can't get in and be part of what's happening and have this area be a community of excellence and opportunity if we don't start somewhere and invest in ourselves. So the organizers, you all know probably Todd Lewis. He's helping with this, people's in here, and they're doing a yeoman's job of scaling this up. So it'll be in Durham, it'll be 17th and 18th. That's where we're going to look at open.ai and look at what's there. We've got many tickets here, free tickets here, and a whole schedule. And we'll be there. It's an awesome opportunity.
Cool, thank you. It's a great organization. It's going to be an amazing opportunity. As Marsha mentioned, there's a limited number of some free passes for those who are able to. Please register and pay to help those organizers to keep driving that forward as well. But feel free to reach out to any of our team or to Marsha as you go forward. There's also some entrepreneurs in the room, including one, Josh Cooter over here, who's developing some technology to help people to really network with each other, to get the most out of these random conversations. How many of us, like, they meet somebody, oh my God, I want to follow up, and then you leave the room and you think, like, oh my gosh, I didn't get their business card, or they got lost in the LinkedIn shuffle. Talk to Josh about what he's doing. He's got a really cool venture focused on how to connect at these kind of events. And in just a moment, we're going to have the opportunity to get up and have some drinks and talk to each other. I also want to call out these two gentlemen in the front row, Tracy and Ethan, I met yesterday out in East Carolina. They're working on their first venture. They're students working on how can I get a startup company to help pay while I'm going through college. They have some focus on providing services that all of us at some point might do ourselves or might prefer to have someone do for us, in terms of, hey, we got to power wash my house, I got to clean the windows, I've got to do things that those of us that have real estate like to do. There's an opportunity for them to tap into a community that they didn't know about before. They thought, well, hey, I've just got this cool services business. What is this technology thing? How can I automate? How can I collect data? How can I run efficient operations? For those that know Scott, who does the Triangle Cleaner stuff, right? Scott Wingo started a company called Spiffy, washing cars. And then IoT and datafied that company, and it is off to the races in global dominance, right? So every single industry is going to be impacted by real-time data in this data economy. So come chat with them, learn about their organization, figure out how you can help these entrepreneurs. We are running a program that we run every year called Developer Day. This year, we're going to make Developer Day into kind of an AI summit, because that's a hot topic. We'll probably have a few technology topics and some other areas as well. That's going to be April 22nd, so keep your eye out for that. That'll be a free event. That'll be our next kind of really big event here in the area. We're doing some other events in partnership with an organization called Triangle Tech Night. How many folks have maybe been out to a Triangle Tech Night event? Amazing organization, doing great stuff. They've got an event coming up on February 13th, I think, out in Chapel Hill, focused on healthcare technologies. I'll be there. A few others will be there as well. And so look forward to seeing you there. We run accelerator programs on a near continuous basis. We're actually working on final interviews right now for our next cohort, which is going to be in Wilson, North Carolina. But we'll be announcing soon, I can't say where, but there is going to be a summer program in the Triangle, the broader Triangle region that'll be coming out soon. And so I expect by March, applications for that program will open. That's also a free program. It's a competitive application to get in. I'm going to make a plug here that most people don't think about. We're a little bit unique. We're stage agnostic in the accelerator program that we run. We work with a lot of early stage companies, but increasingly we're working at times with multi-billion-dollar multinational companies in our startup accelerator. We're working with municipal government teams in our accelerator program. All of us are innovators and entrepreneurs. And if we're going to continue, if you're in industry, you're in business, you are going to have to adjust your business to this data economy. Like it or not, the technology is going to drive the economy forward. Our program is kind of architected as well to help you. So if you're interested in learning about that, let us know. We're also exploring this fall, running some kind of technology leadership workshops for senior management in established industries, and a little bit of a retreat workshop fashion. We haven't announced that publicly yet, but if anybody's interested in learning more about what we're doing and how to get involved, happy to talk to you about that as well. So with that, I'm going to take a few questions and then we'll open up to some more networking, but I'm interested to hear feedback. Yes, Tom.
I had a question I was going to seeded micro at or open.
Yes, thank you for reminding me. So NCID, I mentioned before, deploying all this capital, their spring cycle applications are open right now. Micro is a $10,000 award. It's really for, you got a great idea and you need to do something to test that, to pressure test and see, is this something where we can turn into a company? You're a good candidate for that program. The seed award is really great for, I have some traction, I'm moving forward, and if I just had a little bit of capital to invest, boy, could I hit an inflection point. Like, those are the kind of organizations I'm looking for. Do you have some information sessions as well still?
Online.
Online, perfect.
Let me ask you something.
Yes.
Do you have to pay that money back?
Has anyone heard a big word called non-dilutive? I mean, that's money that does not take an ownership stake in your company. Grants are non-dilutive. By the way, the most important non-dilutive money is just sales. But NCID, it's basically free money. You need to use it in the way that you said you were going to use it, but don't take the money and buy a Ferrari. But it's amazing, right? This is one of the unique asset advantages we have in North Carolina is this private foundation. That's part of that, like 75% of R&D investment that our state does. It's not from the public sector. So yeah, thank you for being here and reminding me of that. Steve.
Tom, Steve Rao of Morrisville. Thank you for everything that you do. My question is, what advice do you have to our new governor, Josh Stein, from a chief executive of the state, of how we can leverage the momentum that you had, and also other government officials, of just how we can accelerate this across the county and the state? Do you have any big ideas of what we can do to do a better job?
Cool. So Steve's question is like, whether you want to talk to me or not, what's my advice for Josh Stein and other government officials in this space? I think, one piece is, just getting out and talking to your constituents, hearing what their concerns are and so on. Like, that's basic, like, government 101, and I think that's already happening. But I think we need to prepare as a state to say, how are we going to get our focus on the top line? How are we as a state going to drive the revenue so we can continually invest in our future? And how do we make sure that our state is recognized the world around as the center of excellence for the economy? So the Small Business Administration Regional Innovation Cluster, that's a piece of it, right? Tell your friends about this. Tell the story that we're here. I often tell people, like, if you decide, you know what, I'm going to go make a movie, right? Where do you go? You go to Hollywood. That's where all the expertise is. Like, I'm going to record a country music album. You don't come to Raleigh for that, right? You go to Nashville. Well, if you want to do something this day in economy, you come here, and that is because we let the world know about it, and we invest in it. So that's really what the message would be, you know, for anybody in the General Assembly and Josh Stein Brothers is, we got to make sure we're not just looking at removing the government inefficiency on the kind of the DOGE side of the product line, but we're looking at how we invest in our future. Yes, Colin.
What's the call to action on that? Because I can't call Governor Stein.
Well, apparently Steve can. So,
I think it's safe to assume that everyone is in support of that, but there's a critical mass that needs to rise above all opportunities and noise.
Yeah.
How can we support you with the many ESOs in the state to
Yeah.
get at the table?
So,
We're ready, but it's
I mean, a big piece of that, you're absolutely, a piece of that is, you got to talk to your elected officials. Probably a bigger piece of that is you've got to vote out the ones that aren't doing what needs to happen and vote in the ones that are. But, of course, who are the elected officials going to listen to? They're going to listen to numbers. So really, really, you know, big and loud support for, like, this is what we want to do as a state, this is what's important. But more importantly, if you're working in organizations, get the leadership of your companies talking to them. I was part of a project that the Raleigh Chamber ran last week, and the Wake County as well, Raleigh Wake County together. It was a visioning exercise that had about 15 or so of us from around the region in different industries talking about, like, what are the future industries? What's 20 years look like? And what do we need to do at a policy level and investment level and so on to be the leaders in the new economy? And quite honestly, it's interesting. My view on that is it's not actually so much just about positioning around industry. This data economy is a horizontal. AI is a horizontal. It's not a vertical. Like like agriculture is a vertical, or manufacturing is a vertical, right? AI cross-cuts across all of that stuff. So we want to demonstrate that AI leadership. I think the biggest wins are going to be those niche companies I talked about, the folks that are doing like an amazing AI tool for like a really niche kind of market where they can capture that and drive it. Like, those are going to be great stories to tell versus just being generalists. But at the end of the day, the thing that makes our state the most attractive to business, it's really just two things. It's talent and it's affordability. We have amazing talent here, and to grow the talent is all about in-migration. Like, we'll grow some of it through increased investment in university systems and community colleges, and we should do that. But immigration is where a lot of that talent comes from. It's the people that are coming here from Silicon Valley, from New York, from Massachusetts, Boston, and they're coming here for affordability and quality of life. So economic development, I believe, is going to look less like, hey, look at this massive site development and this big tax incentive program, which, by the way, all big companies in North Carolina, I don't know why we're cursed, but they all failed to deliver on the job creation and then renege on the tax incentive. So that policy's got to go. But it's going to be about having the place that we want to live and keeping it affordable. I think one of the big cores to that in this entrepreneurial and business community is if our downtown real estate gets so expensive that the only, say, restaurant and retail spots are corporate chains, then we're the same as Chicago or some other place, right? We want to have locally owned restaurants and so on. So, like, vote for local businesses with your pocketbooks, support those, and so on. It's going to be hard because as we grow, we are going to get more expensive. So the affordability piece is being tough. I don't know if that fully answered Colin's question, but I saw another question here.
Plus, wait, you also
yeah, sorry.
get a RIoT t-shirt.
Oh, I was missing that. Yeah, throw out some shirts.
Yeah, if you ask a question, you get a t-shirt, so also rep RIoT t-shirts.
All right.
Yeah.
There we are. There you go. All right, yes, so.
First of all, I want to thank you for the excellent work you've done, worked with you in the past with the Black Business Expo in Durham. and Jason Witten, pretty much from the time we got started. But I want to look at two bookends. Bookend number one is the greatest national threat to economic security in the history of the United States. It involves a $68 trillion wealth transfer, also known as the silver tsunami. So we have 78 million baby boomers, high school class of 1985.
Yep.
There's only 40 million of us, millennials, 80 million millennials. We have these bookends. So not only do we have the bookends between the baby boomers and the silver tsunami impact to the right, but then we have past millennials or Generation X or whatever, and AI to the right or to the left. How we cannot, I started my career with NAFTA in business process automation with SAP, Bond, Oracle. We as a country cannot automate fast enough to cover the manpower gap. So how are you seeing, one of the things I like what you said about not only do we work with billion-dollar companies and municipalities and startups, but this missing middle where you have to have companies, let's say between $500,000 and $5 million, that are having to remake themselves. I own a partnership in mechanical contracting firm.
Yep.
And now with IoT in terms of controls, artificial intelligence, building automation, there are men and women who thought that they were going to retire who are not retiring. So I guess to put it in a nutshell, when we're looking at retirement and death being inevitable, and we're looking at AI, but we're looking at the workforce, what do you think the community could do? Because if I have to vote for you to have more funding, you have my vote. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But what can the community do to look at some of these small businesses that are maybe putting out the pasture too early because the business itself is not remaking itself? So I guess this is more a question of business sustainability. Because we have if you remember a long time ago, small businesses would go into the plan rooms, right?
Yep.
But if I'm 63 years old and I'm a HVAC technician, you know what I mean? IoT scares the bejesus out of me. And I can't go to the plan room and look at the plans because everything now is in the clouds. But if we don't do something to bridge that gap, I think it could exacerbate the challenge. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Great question. There's a lot to unpack there. I'll get to what I can, right? So, yes, fact. We're becoming more and more dominated by an aging population that's leaving the workforce. That's going to be a big challenge over the next 20 years. There is not enough housing for them. There's not actually enough housing anywhere. From an affordability point of view, that is probably the number one thing we got to fix. We just need more housing. Developers are having to develop like the really high end of the market. We need more of the middle and the low end. Let's go back to math. I love math. I'm an engineer, right? Normal distributions are wonderful. Normal distributions are what happens, all over nature. It's kind of the natural order of things. We want that. We do not have a normal distribution in our economy. Like almost all the wealth is sucked up into this tiny fraction. One of the stats I heard, a little non sequitur, but I heard just today, I think it was, or yesterday, the tax cuts that President Trump is proposing, the amount of money, just 10 richest people will save would fund the entire Department of Education that they're looking to close down. You could impact some of the money that those rich people don't actually use or deploy because there's so much they can't do anything with it. And you could still have this Department of Education they want to cut out. Like, that's not a normal distribution. So a middle class is what we need. And from the middle class, what I think about most importantly is not necessarily the middle class of us as workers in America, but the way to get to that is to have a middle class of business. We have in every industry, just about every single industry you can think of, the vast majority, like the large majority of market share is 5 or fewer companies in the United States. Whether that's grocery stores, whether that's meat packing companies, whether that's cloud providers, whether that's cellular operators, whatever aspect of our lives that we have. I think I heard that 80% of all products in a grocery store come from just 5 companies. Right? There's lots of brands, but they're all the same companies. I used to give my children a hard time because they didn't want to buy store brand cereals and other store brand products. You know, I spent a lot of my years in manufacturing facilities, primarily in the electronics space, but also sometimes I got a chance to tour a facility somewhere else. Guess what? You know, that store brand Cheerios comes off the same darn production line as the non-store brand Cheerios. They just go in a different box, right? They might tweak like one ingredient here and there. Like, the fact that we don't have the middle class of companies, these companies that are, you know, 10 to say 500 employees that maybe $1 million to $500 million revenue, like those are the companies that then create the middle class of jobs. I mentioned that maybe all hope is not lost as AI replaces jobs, because companies will say, well, let's keep hiring some people and make them 9 times more productive. You know what that means? 9 times more of the wealth of that company is going to the top, because you're still going to kind of get paid the same, right? So unfortunately, that productivity gain is further taking us away from that bell curve. I don't have a direct answer for that, other than like, we want an SEC chair that's going to break up monopolies. That's going to say, if you're working in a different industry, you know, let's say you're a telecommunications provider and you want to buy a content company. You know, you're an AT&T, you want to buy an HBO. Like, that should be seen as not, those are different industries, so there's no monopoly there. No, that's, verticalization is monopoly. Like, we need to break up that kind of behavior. How do we get there? We do what Australia does. Right? Australia just announced that they're going to limit to $20,000 for anyone to support a contribution to a financial campaign, including the person running for the campaign, by the way. You got to get the power out of politics. I don't know that I have an answer for how to get there, but middle class and bell curve distributions, that's what we need. Yes.
I want to go back to what you were saying about AI and it's like this aggregation of data and all the sensors everywhere, and that you're seeing like your prediction is in a few more years, data breaches, like that kind of cybersecurity issue is going to be as prolific as it is with like our banking information now. And you know, I'm thinking biometrics helps that. However, do you see a niche that we could help drive within the startup community here in Raleigh to get on top of that, so that when it happens within a few years, if I think it's accurate, we're there to like be at the forefront of that?
I think that from just like a pure tech point of view, probably the biggest issue that we need to solve is around data privacy. And cybersecurity is a big piece of this, because that, you know, one way to lose data privacy is for somebody to hack and get it. The other is for us to, you know, walk down the street and get captured by a camera that we didn't know was capturing us, that maybe they're using that camera for who knows what reason, right? The EU just finally is now actively enforcing regulations that they started in play a couple years ago that include things like you are now no longer allowed to do facial recognition in public spaces. Like, that's illegal. You know, will the company still do it? It's hard to say. How do you know? That's hard to say. But so there's some policy stuff. To your question about like locally, what do we do? The first thing is everyone should recognize you have all been hacked. There's no question. We've all been hacked, right? Some of us did like just open the door. Some of us put TikTok on our phones. Sorry. But we've all been hacked in some way. If you want a really, really well-researched but still entertaining read, there is a book by a woman. I'm sorry, I don't recall the name of this journalist. She was the beat reporter for cybersecurity for New York Times for about 10 years or so. And she published a book that's it's a little bit older now, because it came out, the last chapter in the book is going through, you know, did the voting machines get hacked or not, as Trump was arguing that the election was rigged when he lost to Biden. So it's like, I guess it's about 4 years old now, but in this book, she provides really compelling evidence to show that just basically everyone's been hacked. And it's like the Cold War, right? I grew up in this, whoever launches a nuke, they can't do it because somebody will counter launch and, we'll all die, right? We'll all, the nuclear retaliation is kind of the cyber thing now. Like, everybody's been hacked, they have all the vulnerabilities, at any time anybody could like shut down the grid, or they could do this, but they can't do it fast enough that we couldn't do it back, and all of a sudden, the whole grid shut down, or whatever. And I'm not trying to be too scary here, but this is where we're at. The vast majority of purchases, in fact, all purchases of the major vulnerabilities that are discovered by hackers and others are bought by nation states. Sometimes to exploit them, and sometimes to bring them to the public so they get patched, right? The good news is, and I'm going to apologize again, none of us are that important. So individually, the fact you've been hacked isn't probably that big a deal. If you're a municipal government, it's a big deal. There still are tremendous frequencies of ransomware attacks against municipal government. Usually the government tries to just pay the ransom and get out before even anybody knows about it, because there's nothing they really can do about it. Those kind of things are out there. There are folks doing interesting things. There's a startup company that works out of the rework facility down the road here called ROWND, R-O-W-N-D, that's doing very novel things to say, like, hey, let's replace the password with other kinds of authentication tools and make it really easy for a startup company to put really secure authentication without being a cybersecurity expert, right? So that's an interesting thing. I do believe, I mentioned earlier, quantum is a little bit far away, but there's no real compelling reason that we can't, the Triangle of North Carolina, be the global center of excellence for quantum. And whoever first gets quantum is going to be able to have a cryptographic advantage in the security space. And there'll be startups involved in that. Probably the most important startup in the quantum space right now is a company called IMQ, and they're right in Durham. So that's still a number of years out. That's still startup-y. Maybe that's a little bit more techy than you're thinking about, but there's cool stuff happening right here. Just back to the point, like, okay, you've been hacked, but most of your activity isn't actually that important to anybody. Do the two really, really simple things to protect yourself as best as you can. Have complex passwords and use two-factor authentication. All right, let's do one more and then open it up. I know we've run pretty long. Or maybe we're done. Great. Get some drinks, grab some more food, chat with Josh, chat with Ethan and Tracy, chat with all the folks in the room. Thank you for coming.